My name is Dana Whitlow. I am 67 years old. After 40 years of chasing sirens, I thought I had finally earned quiet nights and early mornings by the river. But that evening, the dispatch office called and asked if I could cover for a younger medic who had come down with the flu, just a standby shift. They said, "No emergencies expected." I hesitated only a moment before agreeing. Old habits, I suppose. You spend half a life answering alarms, and silence starts to sound unnatural. By the time I reached the Artemis Country Club, Portland's sky had folded into a steady mist, the kind that blurs everything streetlights. Memories, even the faces you'd rather forget. I parked my old Subaru beside a row of black sedans, noting how my reflection looked out of place among the polished luxury cars. Inside, the place gleamed marble floors, crystal chandeliers, waiters moving smoothly between tables. A small brass sign read, "Montgomery Wren Wedding, Ballroom B." I checked in with the coordinator, who looked me over with polite confusion, as if trying to reconcile my worn jacket with the grandeur around her. "Just routine coverage," I explained. "Congratulations to the happy couple." She nodded, relieved that I would remain invisible unless something went wrong. From my station near the service hallway, I could hear the band warming up. Laughter spilled through the doors, bright and distant. I sipped coffee from a paper cup and reminded myself it was only one night. One more shift to prove I still knew what to do if the world tilted suddenly. Outside, the rain thickened against the windows. The lights shimmered across the ballroom floor. Somewhere beyond those walls, a young bride was laughing, unaware that her perfect evening was about to brush against everything I'd tried so hard to leave behind. The music was swelling when I heard the scream, a woman's voice, sharp enough to cut through the laughter and the clink of glass. I was already moving before anyone called for help. The ballroom doors swung open, and heat, perfume, and panic hit me all at once. A crowd had gathered around the head table. The bride was on the floor, her white train spread like spilled milk, her hand twitching against the marble. A man in a tuxedo, probably the groom, was kneeling beside her, shouting her name. "Clara, Clara, stay with me." "I'm a medic," I said. "Pushing through. Give me space." He looked up, desperate, as I knelt. She couldn't breathe. "Any allergies? Medical conditions?" He shook his head. "Lost. None." I checked her pulse. Faint, but steady. Her skin was pale under the makeup, her breathing shallow. "She needs air," I said, lifting the veil that covered her face. The lace brushed my glove. As I lifted it, the features felt strangely familiar, stirring memories I hadn't touched in years. Same sharp chin, same dimple that appeared when she half smiled. My throat tightened. "Ma'am," the groom's voice was pleading. I blinked, forcing my hands to steady. "She's going to be fine," I said quietly, more to myself than to him. "Just a moment." I loosened the collar of her dress, applied oxygen, and waited as her chest rose again, slower, but stronger. She stirred, eyelids fluttering. "Clara," the groom whispered. Her eyes opened, unfocused at first, then locking on mine. A faint, confused smile flickered. "Excuse me. Do I know you?" she whispered, her eyes narrowing slightly as if searching her memory. The sound of my name in her voice stopped me cold. I hadn't heard it spoken like that in nearly half a century. Before I could answer, another woman's voice, older, commanding, cut through the noise. "Everyone, step back. Give her air." Security moved in, ushering the crowd away. I lowered the mask from her face and sat frozen beside her, my heart pounding in the same rhythm I'd sworn I'd forgotten. The groom thanked me, but I barely heard him. All I could see were her eyes, and the impossible recognition that came with them. The bride's breathing steadied under the oxygen mask. Her pulse grew stronger against my fingers, and color began to creep back into her cheeks. The crowd was quiet now, 100 eyes fixed on us. She blinked slowly, disoriented, and whispered through the mask, "Do I know you?" The words pierced deeper than they should have. My mind scrambled for sense, but my mouth moved first. "It's me, Lil," I said before I could stop myself. Her brows knit. "Lil," she repeated, confused, her voice muffled by the mask. The groom's hand tightened around hers. "Clara, don't try to talk," he said softly, though his tone carried a warning meant for me. I leaned back, breath catching. "I'm sorry," I muttered. "You reminded me of someone." From the corner of my eye, a woman approached, her voice firm and precise. Her posture was exact, her gaze sharp and assessing. "Who authorized you to touch my daughter-in-law?" she demanded. "I'm a medic," I replied evenly. She collapsed. I responded. "She's fine now. You may go," the woman said, already signaling to a pair of men in suits. The groom spoke up, hesitant. "Mother, please," she helped. "Escort her out," the woman interrupted. "We don't need a scene." 2 guards stepped closer. I gathered my kit with shaking hands, avoiding the bride's gaze. As they led me toward the door, I heard her faint voice again. Softer this time. "Lil," she murmured, almost to herself. The sound froze me mid-step. I turned, but one of the guards pressed lightly at my shoulder. "Ma'am, this way." The ballroom doors closed behind me, sealing in the music and the questions I wasn't ready to face. When I got home, the rain had thickened into a steady curtain over the river. The apartment smelled faintly of coffee and old paper, a smell I'd grown used to. One that asked nothing from me. I hung my coat, sat down, and tried to steady my hands. They were trembling the way they used to after a long shift. Except tonight. No adrenaline could explain it. Her face wouldn't leave my mind. That half smile. That quiet question. "Do I know you?" I'd spent decades burying the memory of the only person who ever looked at me that way. I walked to the hall closet and reached for the top shelf. A small cardboard box sat behind a stack of towels, taped and retaped until the edges turned soft. In black marker, across the lid, one word: Lila. I hadn't opened it in years. The tape peeled slowly, like skin healing from an old burn. Inside lay the pieces of a life that ended or was supposed to end on a winter night in 1974. There was a photograph, first 2 girls sitting on a porch step. I was 15. Awkward, already trying to act like a grown-up. Lila was 12, grinning wide, her front tooth slightly chipped. Her arm was looped around my shoulders, and her hair caught the light the same way the bride's did tonight, soft gold with a hint of copper. Beneath the photo lay a newspaper clipping. Edges browned, foster home fire. Claims 3, 1 missing. I'd read it so many times the words had worn thin. The state had called it an accident. I still blamed myself. I'd been delayed at school, finishing end-of-day paperwork, and by the time I arrived, the fire had already consumed the house. When I got there, the house was already gone, the air thick with the smell of burned wood and rain. I picked up another photo, one I'd nearly forgotten, a close-up of Lila at the lake, hair damp, tilting her head, the crescent birthmark beneath her right ear just visible. My chest tightened. It wasn't just resemblance. It was her, or someone wearing her face. The box still smelled faintly of smoke. I closed it carefully, hands shaking, and felt the weight of memory settle like ash on my skin. By morning, sleep had abandoned me. Had abandoned. The city was washed clean after the storm, but my thoughts still dragged through ash. I made coffee, opened my old laptop, and typed the name I'd heard the groom call out again and again: Clara Wren. Nothing. No school records. No voter registration. No childhood home. Just a line in a glossy society column: Clara Wren to wed Evan Montgomery. Son of real estate magnate Richard Montgomery. A photograph accompanied it, the same face I'd seen under the veil, smiling at the camera. Perfect. Untouchable. I leaned closer. The caption said she was born in Boston. Moved west 10 years ago. Now working in interior design 10 years ago. I thought, around the same time I'd finally stopped looking for Lila. I searched deeper public records, hospital archives, even a few old EMS databases I still had access to through friends. I called an old colleague, Vince, now working dispatch. "Can you check a name for me? Clara Wren." He grunted. "That's vague. Dana. Birth date, roughly early 30s. Married last week at the Artemis Country Club." A pause. No medical license. No driver's renewal. No listed next of kin. Ghost. Maybe. Why I hesitated. Just curious. After hanging up, I kept digging. A woman named Clara Wren appeared in Oregon in 2010. Records were sparse. Addresses changed. And her trail seemed intentionally obscured. The first trace was a real estate deed under a Montgomery trust. I sat back, the hum of the refrigerator filling the silence. Grief had turned into something colder, steadier purpose. If this woman had taken Lila's name, or her face, I needed to know why. The screen glowed pale against the dim apartment, and in that light, the resemblance sharpened until it was unbearable. I wasn't chasing ghosts anymore. Someone was still alive, and someone else had helped her stay hidden. 2 days later, I drove up into the West Hills with a folded report in my pocket and a lie rehearsed on my tongue. The Montgomery estate sat behind iron gates and a security booth that gleamed like a mirror. When I said I was with the medical response team, the guard waved me through without question. Money has a way of trusting its own reflection. Inside, the house looked like something built to impress silence. A woman waited at the top of the staircase, tall, elegant, hair silvered and sharp as a blade. "Margaret Montgomery, I'm sorry to intrude," I said, holding up the clipboard. "Just routine follow-up. The bride's vitals were stable, but I'd like to confirm she's recovering well." She didn't offer her hand. "Clara is resting. She doesn't need reminders of that evening." "Of course," I replied. It must have been frightening. Her eyes didn't blink. Not frightening. Unpleasant. And unnecessary. I kept my tone neutral. An allergic reaction can happen to anyone. We only want to ensure she's safe. Margaret stepped closer, her perfume subtle but suffocating. "Mrs. Whitlow, isn't it retired paramedic? You handled yourself well, but your presence caused confusion." Confusion. She was emotional, exhausted. Weddings do that to young women. "I understand," I said quietly, though she did seem to recognize me. Her expression hardened. She recognized no one. "And if you care for your reputation, you'll let that fantasy end here." The words landed clean and deliberate, the way people speak when they're used to being obeyed. I folded the clipboard. "My only concern is her health, and mine is my family's privacy," she said. "We can both be satisfied if you remember your place." A housekeeper appeared with my coat before I could answer. The message was clear. Outside, the air felt colder than it should have. As the gates closed behind me, I looked back once at the mansion's glowing windows, perfect and distant. Like a row of smiling teeth, somewhere inside, a truth was being buried alive. I found him in a quiet retirement complex on the east side of the city. The door opened before I could knock twice. "Mrs. Whitlow," he said, his voice thin but kind. "You're early. Thank you for agreeing to see me." "Mr. Lindstrom," I said. "It's about the fire in 1974, the foster home on Larch Street." He hesitated, then stepped aside. The apartment smelled of dust and old files. "I worked that case," he murmured. "But those records were sealed decades ago." "I know. I was one of the kids." He studied my face for a long moment. You're Dana. Yes. Lila was my sister. His eyes softened, the weight of recognition sinking in. That night never left me either, he said quietly, pulling a thin folder from a cabinet. I shouldn't have this, but I couldn't throw it away. He laid it on the table between us. My name was typed in black ink Whitlow, Dana. Below it, another line Whitlow, Lila presumed deceased. The page trembled in my hands. Look at the follow-up, he said, the one dated 6 months later. The second document was a transfer notice from the state minor female recovered from secondary location, placed under private adoption order. The signature at the bottom blurred until I blinked twice to be sure M. Montgomery. I stared at it, the letters like a wound reopening. She wasn't dead. She was found in critical condition, he said. A wealthy couple claimed to be her sponsors. Said they'd cover the medical bills if the adoption stayed confidential. The state approved it to save face after the tragedy. My voice came out thin, and no one ever checked who she really was. The system back then was loose. Once the paperwork left the office, it vanished into private hands. I protested. But they said it was mercy, not theft. I traced the name with my finger, the paper trembling beneath it. Montgomery, I whispered. Mr. Lindstrom reached across the table. I'm sorry, he said. I thought you should know the truth, even if it comes too late. I closed the folder, the sound sharp in the still room. Too late or not. The name on that page had just rewritten the story of my life. I arrived uninvited. The gates opened anyway when I said the word medical, and no one thought to stop an old woman carrying a folder under her arm. The mansion glowed against the dusk, all gold windows and laughter spilling from the terrace. Inside, waiters floated between tables where the Montgomery family and their guests toasted a new marriage built on my sister's stolen life. Margaret saw me first. Her smile cracked, though only for a second. Mrs. Whitlow, she said smoothly, rising from her chair. You seem to have lost your way again. I held the folder against my chest. I found what you took from me. Evan stood beside his bride, uncertain. Mother, what's going on? Nothing, Margaret said sharply. Security will handle it. 2 men in black suits started toward me. My heart hammered, but the fear was old now, familiar, manageable. I stepped forward, my voice steady. Before you send me out, ask her about the birthmark. Behind her right ear, the room stilled. Conversations cut off mid-sentence. Clara's hand lifted instinctively, brushing her hair aside. Don't, Margaret hissed. But Clara's fingers stopped at the spot just below her ear, and when she looked at her hand, her face changed confusion, sliding into something deeper. It's shaped like a crescent, she whispered. I used to touch it when I was scared. Her voice cracked. There was smoke, a fire. Someone was shouting my name. I stepped closer. It was me, I said softly. Dana. I was late that night. I came back for you. Tears welled in her eyes, mascara streaking down her cheeks. Dana Evan reached for her shoulder, stunned. Clara, what is she talking about? Margaret's voice rose, sharp and desperate. Enough of this nonsense. That girl was an orphan. She had no one. She had me, I said. I opened the folder, slid the document onto the table, your signature. You paid to erase who she was. Margaret's lips parted, but no sound came. The papers trembled under her gaze. Clara stepped toward me, her breath uneven. I remember the sirens, she whispered. You held my hand. You said not to let go. I never did. I said. The guests sat frozen, faces pale beneath the chandelier's light. The perfection around us cracked gold, glass, and lies scattering all at once. Margaret sank into her chair, eyes wide. Silence finally catching her. The story broke before sunrise. Reporters camped outside the Montgomery gates. shouting questions about forged adoptions and sealed state files. By afternoon, the family's lawyers issued statements, all polished denial and selective sympathy. None of it mattered. The truth was out. That evening, my doorbell rang. I opened it to find Lila, standing there without makeup, her hair pulled back, eyes red but steady. "Can I come in?" she asked. I nodded. She stepped inside, clutching a small scarf in her hands like it was something alive. "They said it's going to take weeks to sort through everything," she said quietly. "The papers, the records, the money. I don't care about any of it." I set a cup of tea in front of her. "You shouldn't have had to learn your life this way." She smiled faintly. "Neither should you." For a moment, neither of us spoke. The sound of rain against the window filled the silence. "When they told me about the fire," she whispered, "I thought I'd imagined the girl calling my name. I used to dream of her voice. But they said it was just trauma. It was real." I said, "I came back for you too late." Lila looked at me, and the distance of 40 years collapsed in that gaze. "You were the only thing I remembered right." I reached across the table, my hand trembling as hers met mine. There was no reunion, no grand forgiveness, just the fragile stillness of two women who had finally run out of lies. Outside, sirens wailed somewhere far away, fading into the dark, like the ghosts we had finally laid to rest. Months passed before the noise faded. The lawsuits, the headlines, even the whispers all drifted away like mist over the water. What remained was quieter, steadier. Lila and I met every Thursday by the river. She always brought a thermos of tea, and I carried a small glass jar I had once used to store medical gauze. Inside it, a candle waited. We lit it together, the flame trembling against the wind. "For the night of the fire," she said once, "and for the night we found each other again." I answered. We never spoke long. Some wounds preferred silence, and ours had earned that peace. When the light finally burned low, we let the river take the smoke. That evening, back at home, I climbed the porch steps and screwed in a new bulb above the door. It shone softly across the railing, golden and patient. My neighbor asked why I kept it on all night. I told her, "It's for anyone still trying to find their way home." I sat by the window, watching the porch light reflect on the river, and felt a quiet settle over the night.